Hi, I'm Romy. My sister told the police I attacked her, and that's how I ended up in handcuffs. But that wasn't the worst part. What shattered me was realizing it wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. Years in the making. One that turned my own family against me. One that erased me from pictures, from memories, from every place I once called home. And yet, when she opened the gift I sent her, she screamed. Want to know why? Saturday morning in early spring had always carried the same rhythm for me. Coffee on the porch, a quiet read, and then maybe some grating. That morning wasn't any different. I had just stepped into my slippers when I heard the doorbell ring. I wasn't expecting anyone, and my neighborhood wasn't the kind where surprises happened. That's what made it jarring. I opened the door expecting maybe a delivery mix-up. Instead, two officers stood in front of me, one already reading something from a clipboard, while the other asked if I was Romy Elaine Hartwell. I nodded. And then, "Ma'am, we're here to place you under arrest. There's a warrant issued for assault." My first instinct was to laugh. There's got to be some mistake. They didn't laugh. One stepped forward with handcuffs, while the other asked if anyone else was home. "No, just me. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." The cold steel closed around my wrists. My robe shifted. I realized I hadn't even brushed my teeth. I could see Mrs. Branson from next door, peeking through her blinds. Two high schoolers walking their dog stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. And all I could think was, I'm a teacher. What are my students going to think if they hear about this? They walked me to the car like I was some kind of threat. Every eye on the street seemed to follow me. I tried not to cry. At the station, the world became sterile and mechanical. The intake officer didn't even make eye contact when she asked me to remove my jewelry. They took my fingerprints, my photo, and finally put me in a holding cell with a mattress that looked older than I was. I sat on the edge of that cot trying to piece together what had happened. My brain clung to denial like a life raft. Then it hit me. Vera. She'd been tense last week when we spoke. That tone in her voice, the way she always used phrases like, "You're lucky I'm so patient with you," or, "I could have done worse." At the time, I brushed it off. That was just how Vera was. Always the golden child, always quick with the passive-aggressive put-downs. But filing a police report? The guard came by, muttering something about phone privileges. I called home. My mother answered. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm at the police station. They said I assaulted Vera. I didn't." She didn't let me finish. "Romy, you need help," she said, voice clipped. "This isn't healthy. You've always been difficult." My chest tightened. "You don't believe me? I don't want to get involved in another one of your messes. Until you take responsibility for your behavior, don't call this number again." The click on the other end wasn't loud, but it landed like a slap. I stared at the phone in my hand, the dial tone still humming like some cruel joke. I put it down gently, not trusting myself to speak to anyone else without unraveling. Back in my cell, I sat curled up in the corner, knees hugged to my chest, as the fluorescent light buzzed overhead. I thought of all the little moments I had ignored. That dinner last Christmas, when Vera made a snide comment about how some people just like playing the victim. The way Mom had just nodded. The way no one had asked me what I wanted in years. My breath came slower. This wasn't a nightmare, it was just my life. And maybe, just maybe, it always had been. The ceiling in that holding cell had a crack that split across like a lightning bolt, sharp and aimless. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. Sleep wouldn't come, and neither would peace. There was no comfort in steel and fluorescent light, but worse than the cold floor and scratchy blanket was the stillness. My mind filled the silence with everything I didn't want to remember. It started with a picture. A year ago, I had stopped by the house to drop off a book I borrowed from my father. I hadn't planned to stay. Just a quick visit, polite small talk, maybe an awkward hug. But when I walked into the living room, I froze. There, above the fireplace, hung the same family photo we'd taken when I was 8. I knew it well. My sister in her Sunday best, my parents smiling wide, and me in a yellow dress I hated, squinting into the sun. Except this time, I wasn't in it. It wasn't a new picture. It was that same photo, cropped. My shoulder had been cleanly sliced out. You could still see the edge of my dress if you looked close. But I was gone. No one mentioned it. Not Mom, not Vera, not even Dad, who passed by it twice while carrying a tray of sweet tea. I didn't say anything either. What was I supposed to ask? Hey, why'd you edit your own daughter out of your memories? It had been easier to pretend I didn't notice, just like it had been easier not to make a scene when I found out my name had been left off Vera's wedding program, twice, or the birthday where the cake said Happy Family, instead of listing names. I had thought it was just a theme. Now, I wondered if it had been deliberate. There were always little things. My graduation party, where Vera gave a speech about how some people struggle to find direction, but eventually make it. I was the only one graduating. The applause felt like it was for her. It wasn't until now, sitting here with my legs pulled up on this thin mattress, that I realized how deep the roots went. They hadn't just ignored me. They had been trimming me out of the family tree for years. It wasn't the arrest that made me feel abandoned. It was the long campaign to convince the world I'd never belonged. The pain wasn't about a cell with no clock or windows. It was about knowing that if I disappeared, they'd already have a version of the story without me ready to go. Vera had always been the one who did everything right. She never broke curfew. She got straight A's. She volunteered. She even made cookies from scratch, for God's sake. Meanwhile, I was the hard one. I asked too many questions. I stayed out late. I dropped out of grad school and dared to admit that I was exhausted. And every time I stumbled, Vera was there with her gentle voice and sharp eyes, telling me how I could have done better if only I tried harder, like she did. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her power came in soft suggestions, delivered with a smile. Maybe if you didn't take things so personally, or I'm just worried about how others see you. Concern coded in condescension. I used to believe she was trying to help. I thought maybe I was the problem. But here, with nothing left to distract me, the truth snapped into place like a jigsaw piece I'd been trying to force all my life. She hadn't been guiding me. She'd been setting traps. One compliment for every criticism, one rescue for every public cut. Now she had taken it a step further. She had my name in a police report and her bruised wrist as proof, even if I knew, deep in my bones, that I'd never laid a hand on her. I clenched my fists beneath the blanket. My jaw tightened. They wanted to write me out of the story? Fine. But I was still here, still breathing. And they hadn't accounted for what shadows do when they move. The knock on the glass wasn't loud, but it cut through the hum of the fluorescent lights and the faint coughs from other holding cells. I stood, slow and uncertain. No one had said I was getting a visitor, and I hadn't asked for one. My thoughts were still a mess from the phone call with my mother, and the realization that my sister had set me up. So, I followed the guard down the narrow hallway, heart thudding, unsure if I was walking toward hope or another blow. The visitation room was no brighter than my cell, just cleaner. A table sat between two chairs. On the far side, a man I didn't recognize sat in a crisp gray suit, a thin stack of papers neatly placed in front of him. He didn't look at me as I entered. He waited until I sat down, then smiled. Professional, detached. Ms. Hartwell, I'm Bradley Cohn. I represent your sister, Vera. That name hit me like a slap all over again. I crossed my arms and stared. Why am I here? He slid the papers across the table. This is a temporary financial protection agreement. Just some basic documents to authorize your sister to manage household bills, mortgage payments, things of that nature while you're unavailable. I blinked. Unavailable. He didn't react. It's a precaution. Vera said you'd want to ensure everything stays afloat. She's simply trying to prevent your accounts from freezing, especially with the mortgage due in 2 weeks. I looked at the pages but didn't touch them. This isn't her house. It's mine. The deed is in my name. And she's not disputing that, he replied calmly. This just lets her act on your behalf. Temporarily. The word kept echoing. Temporarily. But nothing about this situation felt temporary. I was sitting in a jail uniform, with dried sweat clinging to my collar, and no one, not a single soul, had stepped up for me. And now, I was supposed to hand over what little stability I had left. Still, I couldn't think clearly. My head throbbed. My stomach hadn't stopped turning since the first night in lockup. The idea of losing the house made something sharp curl in my chest. That house was the one thing I'd managed to hold on to, even when the rest of my life was in chaos. Cone tapped the pen on the table. It's entirely your choice, but the longer the utilities go unpaid, the harder it becomes to protect your credit. Credit. As if that mattered right now. I picked up the pen. My hand shook. The paper was thin, almost transparent. There were legal words I didn't fully understand, but my brain wasn't processing fast enough. I stared at the line where my name was supposed to go. Vera had already written hers in clean, even loops. I signed. The moment the pen lifted, something inside me dropped. He took the papers without another word, gave a courteous nod, and walked out, leaving me alone with the echo of my own decision. The return to my cell felt longer than before. I didn't say anything to the guard, didn't meet anyone's eyes. When the door closed behind me, I leaned against the wall and let out a breath that hurt on its way out. I just handed her the keys to everything. She hadn't just locked me up. She was taking over the very ground I stood on. Vera didn't need a judge or jury. She had timing and manipulation. And I, stupidly, had given her a signature. But the ache in my wrists reminded me of something else. This wasn't the first time Vera had used concern as a weapon. It was her favorite tool. Soft words, quiet voice, always under the guise of helping. But it always cost me something. This time, it cost me my home. I paced the cell for a while, fingers twitching, mind racing. I started to replay everything. Her phone calls, her visit the week before the arrest, her questions about my bank info. How had I missed it? Then again, maybe I hadn't. Maybe I just didn't want to believe someone who shared my blood could smile to my face while pulling the rug out from under me. That was over now. No more guessing. No more benefit of the doubt. I walked to the tiny metal sink, splashed cold water on my face, and looked into the scratched mirror above it. She thinks I'm helpless now. But I've signed more than just paper. I've signed the start of something she won't see coming. They handed me a yellow envelope during breakfast. It was thinner than I expected, just a few stapled pages inside. The return address wasn't my lawyer, or even the court. It was from Vera's attorney. A hearing had been scheduled. Not for the assault charge, not for bail. No, this one was about mental fitness, my ability to be around family, to make decisions, to function like a reasonable adult. Reading that word, fitness, made me feel like I was being evaluated like an old dog at a shelter. Fit for what? To be trusted? To be seen? The hearing was set for 2 days later. No time to prepare. No time to find support. Arden did his best with what he had, but in matters like these, perception outweighs proof. And Vera, I knew, had been sculpting a version of me for years. Just unstable enough to believe but not so wild that people would doubt her for staying connected to me. The day of the hearing, I walked into the Greenville County Family Courtroom in shackles. The orange jumpsuit wasn't necessary. They had already stripped me of dignity. This was just for punctuation. Inside, the air was too cold. Vera sat poised on the opposite side, her blonde hair in a bun, makeup subtle but flawless. She wore navy blue, like she always did when she wanted to be taken seriously. Linny sat beside her, small and silent. Her shoes didn't touch the ground. She looked too young to be part of any of this. The judge glanced over the documents, then asked if any witnesses would be speaking. Vera stood, voice smooth. "Your Honor, my daughter has something to share." My stomach dropped. Linny didn't move at first. Vera placed a gentle hand on her back, nudging her forward. She stood up slowly, clutching the hem of her sweater like it could protect her. The judge leaned in. "Go ahead, sweetheart. Speak clearly." Linny's voice trembled. She scared me. I saw her raise her hand at my mom. She got so mad and I thought she was going to hurt her." She didn't look at me. Not once. I sat frozen, too stunned to react, too heartbroken to protest. The room blurred. I heard the words, but they bounced off the walls like echoes in a cave. That little girl, my niece, whom I had taken to ballet class, whose first birthday I had planned when Vera was on bed rest, had just painted me as a threat. Whether she meant to or not. The judge nodded solemnly. "Given the circumstances, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order. Ms. Hartwell is not to have any contact with the child until further notice." No objection, no debate, just done. Back in the transport van, I sat with my hands resting in my lap. I didn't cry. Not then. I stared at the metal floor, letting the motion of the vehicle shake through me. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to tear open the part of my chest that felt like it couldn't hold the ache anymore. But all I did was sit there, silent. Because the pain wasn't fresh. It had been accumulating. It was just now reaching the surface. Vera hadn't just used the system to ruin my life. She'd used her daughter, my niece. She'd fed her a story, or maybe worse, taught her to believe it, and turned her into a piece of evidence. What kind of person does that? That question stayed with me for hours, even after I returned to my cell. I didn't touch the dinner tray. I didn't talk to the guards. I lay on my side, staring at the wall until the color faded into night. She wanted me erased. She wasn't going to stop at court. She'd rewrite our entire family history if it meant she could be the only name remembered. But I wasn't a footnote, and I wasn't done. She took Linny's voice and turned it into a knife. But I had a voice too, and I was going to use it. She's trained her daughter to lie. I'll teach the world how to listen. The noise of the jail library was always strange. Low hums, hushed coughs, the occasional shuffle of paper. But that day, I didn't hear a thing. I was staring at a legal pad when something in my chest clicked into place. There might still be footage. Last summer, I had installed a cheap security camera above the front porch of my old apartment. The night Vera came over, ranting about something Linny had said to a teacher, I remembered she'd left angry. The next day, she had a bruise. And now, months later, that bruise had become the basis for her claim that I assaulted her. I turned to the guard on duty and requested a call. Not to Arden, not to family, but to my old landlord. Mr. Talbot was in his 70s, ran 5 buildings on his own, and forgot half the things he agreed to. But thankfully, he hadn't deleted anything. "I don't even know what's still on that system," he grumbled. "But you're welcome to check. Still have the login I gave you?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Within a day, Arden was on it. He called in a favor from a tech-savvy paralegal who managed to pull archived clips from the cloud storage. Most were junk, squirrels, delivery men, the wind knocking over potted plants. Then came the one that stopped everything. It was grainy, black and white. But it showed Vera, stepping backward onto my porch. She looked around, then slowly sat herself on the bottom step. She paused, shifted her weight, then let herself slide sideways, just enough to fall awkwardly. Her elbow hit the edge of the second step, and she stayed there for a moment, blinking. Then, before getting up, she looked straight at the camera and smirked. Arden and I watched the clip in silence in the private consultation room. It played no more than 20 seconds, but it changed everything. My hands trembled. Not from sadness, not even from anger. From the terrifying clarity of seeing her performance, seeing how clean, how calculated it was. "This isn't evidence," Arden said finally. "It's ammunition." I swallowed hard. "Will it hold in court?" He nodded. "It won't win everything, but it gives us leverage, especially with the timing of her accusations and your signature on those financial papers." I leaned back in the plastic chair. She didn't just fake an injury, she choreographed the whole thing. He clicked the video off and looked at me carefully. So, how do you want to use this? That was the question, wasn't it? For weeks, all I'd wanted was to clear my name. But now that I had the chance, something deeper stirred. I didn't just want an apology, I wanted the masks to fall. I wanted the Vera everyone else believed in to crumble, publicly. But I also knew how fast sympathy turned sour. One wrong step, and I'd look like the bitter sister with a vendetta. I stared at the table and said, "We're not going to destroy her. We're going to let her do it herself." Arden tilted his head. "That's risky." "It's cleaner," I replied, "and more satisfying." He smiled, almost like he was proud. "Then we do it your way." I nodded, eyes fixed on the paused video screen. I could still see her face, calm, smug, certain that no one would ever look close enough. But someone was looking now. Time to wrap it in a bow. Getting out of temporary holding wasn't the relief I thought it would be. The sunlight felt unfamiliar, the air too clean after weeks of fluorescent lights and recycled chill. Arden was waiting outside the gate, arms crossed, face unreadable. "You really want to do this?" he asked, handing me a plain cardboard box sealed with tape. I nodded. "She has a party today. You know what she loves more than anything? Winning? Being adored." He gave a single, slow nod. "Then let's give her a gift she'll never forget." Inside the box was a still image from the footage. Vera seated on my porch steps, mid-performance, her smirk frozen in time. Beneath it, a copy of the notarized notice of intent to sue. Tucked on top, a note scrawled in clean block letters. "You always like surprises." I had the delivery scheduled for 3 p.m., the peak of her birthday celebration. I didn't need to be there in person. I just needed the timing to be perfect. Diane and Weldon had turned their backyard into something out of a lifestyle magazine. String lights overhead, long tables dressed in pale linens, flower arrangements that looked expensive and overly arranged. Vera floated through the crowd like she was hosting a gala, cheeks kissed, hands squeezed. Everyone adored her, at least the version of her she allowed them to see. I sat 2 houses down in my parked car, the window cracked, fingers tapping against the steering wheel. I watched through the side mirror as the delivery driver stepped out, package tucked under his arm. He passed through the gate, exchanged a few words with someone by the dessert table, and was pointed toward Vera. I saw her expression shift from delighted confusion to mild irritation. She took the box with a polite smile, like it was a minor inconvenience in the middle of her stage. She opened it right there. It took exactly 6 seconds. Her fingers froze. Her mouth parted slightly. Then her eyes darted around the yard, like she was trying to locate the camera, or the person responsible, or maybe both. Then came the sound I hadn't prepared for. She screamed. Not loudly. Not theatrically. It was a sharp, involuntary gasp that cracked under pressure. Guests went silent. One woman whispered something to her husband. Someone else picked up the still photo from the grass where Vera had dropped it. They read the note. Out loud. Vera spun on her heel and marched back into the house, her heels punching into the ground like accusations. The sliding door slammed shut behind her. I didn't smile. This wasn't satisfaction in the petty sense. It was clarity. She had painted me as the unstable one, the bitter sister. Now they had seen what I had lived with. Just a taste, but enough to plant questions. That's all I needed. As the yard buzzed with hushed voices, someone turned the photo around again, squinting at the timestamp. Arden had made sure it was bold, obvious, no editing, no ambiguity. I turned the key in the ignition, but didn't drive off just yet. In the rearview mirror, I saw Diane standing by the patio door, frozen, staring down at the box still lying open in the grass. Weldon stood beside her, saying nothing. I didn't need them to rush after me. I didn't need an apology. I just needed the silence, the moment when everyone stopped believing the perfect image, even if just for a second. This wasn't revenge. It was justice, finally taking root. I didn't expect the knock on my office door to feel like a punch. It was supposed to be a routine check-in with the district HR rep, just paperwork to finalize my return after the legal limbo. But the moment I walked in and saw the folded printout on her desk, my gut told me something was wrong. She didn't look me in the eye, just slid the paper across. "We received this yesterday morning." I picked it up. It was an anonymous email. The language was cold, deliberate. It accused me of a long history of untreated mental illness, violent outbursts in the classroom, and emotional instability that endangered students. No sender, no evidence, just words. I looked up. "You know this isn't real." "I do," she said softly, "but the district has to take it seriously. Effective immediately, you're on administrative leave. Your classes will be reassigned until we complete a full investigation." My heart pounded. "So I'm guilty until proven innocent?" "It's policy, I'm sorry." I walked out without speaking another word. The hallway felt longer than usual, lined with coworkers who couldn't quite meet my eyes. My phone buzzed. Arden. I didn't answer. By the time I got to his office that afternoon, I wasn't just angry, I was vibrating with fury. I dropped the printout on his desk without a word. He scanned it, face tightening. "Let me run a trace. Give me 30 minutes. I paced while he worked, half hearing the clicks and muttered curses. He stopped typing and looked up. It was sent from a Gmail account, fake name, dummy profile, but the IP address? Don't say it. It's connected to Mara's home network. Of course it was. Mara, Fira's longtime friend, the same woman who once told me, "Family's everything, if you're worth keeping." That was at Linny's 6th birthday party. I'd laughed it off at the time. Arden wasn't done. One of Mara's devices logged into the account using a hotspot tied to Vera's house last week. I sat down, hard. For a moment, all the air left the room. "She's not just trying to ruin me," I whispered. "She's trying to erase me, from my job, my family, my entire identity." Arden looked at me gently. "Then we fight harder." That's when I broke, really broke. Not with a tear trickling down my cheek, but with a full, guttural scream, years of swallowing hurt, betrayal, and being told I was too emotional coming out in one ragged exhale. I stood, took another breath, then leaned on the edge of his desk. "We need to hit back, properly, legally." He nodded. "We compile everything, the footage, the forged report, the harassment. I'll start building a case that no judge can ignore." While Arden typed, I scrolled through social media. And there it was. Vera's latest post, a polished headshot. Captioned, "Some people will do anything to seek attention, even turn on their own blood. But the truth speaks louder." The comments rolled in. "She's so brave." I knew something was off with Romy. "Praying for your strength, girl." I stared at the screen, breathing slow and shallow. Then, without hesitation, I closed the app and shut the laptop. If she wanted public sympathy, fine. But the public was about to see a whole different side of her. The real one. If she's playing public now, then it's time the public sees who she really is. The invitation came on a Thursday evening, in the form of a phone call I didn't expect. Diane's voice was stiff, like she'd practiced it a dozen times. "We're having dinner Sunday, just the family. I think it's time." I paused, letting the silence stretch. Then I said, "I'll be there," because I already knew what I needed to do. Sunday came in like summer was trying to slip in early. The air was thick with humidity, and the lawn was freshly mowed, as if the perfect trim could slice through months of tension. I pulled into the driveway and took a moment before stepping out, one hand resting on the envelope inside my bag. It had been a long time since I walked through that front door. The house looked the same, smelled the same too. Lavender and lemon furniture spray, faint pot roast underneath. Vera was already there, perfectly composed, seated between our parents like a prized exhibit. Her dress was pastel, her smile rehearsed. Weldon nodded politely. Diane gave a quick hug, more motion than warmth. Linny sat 2 chairs down, her face unreadable. We made it halfway through the roast and rolls before Diane lifted her glass. I want to acknowledge that we've all been through a difficult season, but I believe families are made stronger when they choose to forgive. I raised my eyebrows. Vera followed with her version of sincerity. We don't always agree, but I believe in second chances, even when some people make mistakes that hurt deeply. Her eyes flicked to mine, just for a second. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope. The table went quiet. I slid it in front of Vera and folded my hands in my lap. Before we toast, this belongs to you. She looked at it, expression faltering. What is this? Open it. The room held its breath as she peeled it open. Out slid a USB drive, 3 notarized documents, and a printed letter with Arden's signature at the bottom. Her fingers trembled. Her smile cracked. What is this? She asked again, voice rising. What are you doing? Arden stepped into the dining room, like he'd always belonged there. Calm, collected. We thought it best you receive this in person. Diane stood halfway. What's going on? I answered without looking at Vera. It's the footage from my security camera, the one she didn't know was still active the night she fell on my steps. Vera's face went white. You manipulated that. It's edited. It's authenticated. We also have the metadata, location logs, and your friend Mara's confession should the court require it. Weldon sat back, eyes wide. Diane looked between us, stunned silent. I didn't mean for things to get this far, Vera whispered, but no one jumped to defend her. No one moved. Linny stood quietly and walked out of the room. No one called her back. I stood next, steady and sure. This isn't about vengeance, I said, my voice calm. It's about ending a lie that's destroyed too much, for too long. And then I left. I walked out of the house I grew up in, not because I wanted to escape, but because I didn't need to stay anymore. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the street. I reached my car, opened the door, and heard footsteps behind me. Linny. She held something small in her hand, a folded piece of notebook paper. She didn't speak right away, just pressed it into my palm, then looked up. I saw everything, she whispered. The next morning, the light hit different. Not warmer, not brighter, just quieter. I sat near the window of my new apartment, coffee in hand, wrapped in the kind of silence that didn't need to be explained. My phone buzzed nonstop, calls, messages, apologies I hadn't asked for, and sympathy I didn't need. I ignored most of it. Instead, I unfolded the little note Linny had handed me the night before. The creases were sharp, as if she'd folded it with nervous fingers. Her handwriting, familiar and uncertain, stretched across the lines. I knew you didn't do it. Mom made me say it. I'm sorry, I was scared. I stared at those words until they blurred. Not because they hurt, but because something inside me finally started to ease. It wasn't absolution, but it was real. And that was enough. Beside it, on the kitchen table, lay another letter I'd been carrying for days. My mother's handwriting on the envelope, delicate and hesitant. It had been tucked between old cookbooks in the back of the cabinet. Arden found it when we were gathering evidence. I didn't open it then. I wasn't ready. But today, I was. Romy, it began, I don't know how to say what I should have said years ago. You were never invisible to me. I just didn't know how to defend you without admitting I had failed you. I let Vera shape the story. I let silence stand in for peace. I'm sorry for every time I didn't speak when I should have. It didn't make everything right, but it made one thing undeniable. I had been seen, even if only in private. The legal mess ended quietly. Vera agreed to a settlement, likely more to save her image than to accept responsibility. My accounts were restored. The school lifted the suspension after Arden submitted the full file of evidence. An apology was issued, off the record. No one admitted fault. No one ever really does in systems like these. Still, I walked back into my classroom without shame. Some neighbors offered weak apologies. We just didn't know what to believe. Others said nothing. That was fine, too. I had stopped waiting for validation. Healing doesn't mean erasing what happened. It means choosing what to carry. So, I carried what mattered. I started volunteering at a youth center near the east end of town. Quiet kids, big stories. I tutored in reading and helped with college essays. Some of them asked if I used to be a teacher. I smiled and said, "Still am." One afternoon, Arden dropped by. He leaned against the doorframe of the small classroom and crossed his arms. "You know," he said, "you didn't just win." I looked up. "No?" He shook his head. "You didn't become her. That's more important." That night, I went home and added 2 things to the board near my front door. Linny's note, still folded, still brave. And my mother's letter, worn at the corners, but intact. They had both lied to protect someone else. But in the end, they had given me something honest, something to anchor me as I moved forward. I stood at the window just before dawn, mug in hand, the street still asleep beneath a pink-tinged sky. And quietly, to no one in particular, I said it aloud. I am not who they said I was. Life doesn't always hand us justice in a clean package. Sometimes, it makes us fight for it with nothing but our voice, our truth, and our refusal to disappear. If there's anything I've learned, it's that silence may protect the powerful, but persistence protects the truth. You don't have to scream to be heard. Sometimes, you just have to outlast the lie. Have you ever been misjudged by the people who were supposed to love you most? How did you rise from that? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a 1 in the comments if this video resonated with you, or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't connect with it, that's okay too. Let me know what you expected and where we lost you. We're here to share, not just to speak. If this story moved you even a little, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. There's always more to tell.